Hi friends, it's Heather with Running with Scissors, and today we are doing the tutorial for your January 2025 box. That's box number 51. So let's get started and see what's in the box. All right, so you're gonna have a few sponges. So I did give you a couple of yellows. I'm not even sure that I'm going to use them, but I wanted you to have them just in case. And a few wedges. You might end up cutting these apart, so make sure you have your scissors handy. Also, a cup of water and some baby wipes will be handy as well. You've got a variety of color of paints here. Now, you'll have the option to paint the little moose hat in burgundies, or I wanted to do mine in blue, so I included this little shiplap blue color, but you can darken your red up to make a burgundy as well. And you'll have a paintbrush. Mine is just from the studio. Yours will be new, but it's going to be the round brush for the fine tip end. You'll have some super glue, and then of course your pieces. All right, so I'm going to just set my box aside, but you can use your box as a table cover or whatever you want to do with it. All right, so let's open your pieces up. And see, this guy is your stand. All right, so we'll just set that aside. And some of these pieces you probably will not use. Melissa does all the cutting. She has no idea what's going on in my brain. So like the little pieces inside the nose, the nostrils, if those are still in there, you could just pop those out. We're not going to use those. All right, so this is what your little guy looks like, and we're just going to start taking pieces apart so that we can paint them. Now, I'm going to divide my pieces according to color. So I know that this piece here is going to be like the off-white color, along with the marshmallows and the, well, not the cocoa drip. The cocoa drip will be brown. The snowflake here, we're going to do in that off-white color. I chose off-white instead of white. All right, so this is his hat, and this is one I talked about that I was going to do in blue. You could do yours in red, or you could darken your red if you would like to. Now, the cup, I am going to do red, but I'm going to darken the red. His hooves are going to be black, so I'm going to pull those off. All right, now in here is what you're going to paint on this piece here is the hoof part. You don't have to worry about getting paint on the cup, okay? So you're gonna paint on this piece. We're gonna paint the bottom, the feet hooves, and we're going to paint the snout. Now, once again, we're gonna cover the like the marshmallow area and the cup area when we paint these, because we don't have to worry about getting paint on those pieces because they're gonna be covered by their own pieces. So I'm gonna start with my black, and I'm going to pull off a wedge, and I am going to cut that wedge in half because I don't need all of it, and I can use the other half later. And so to get started, I am going to paint these hooves. Okay, so light coat there, and I'm gonna do the same with the other one. And now you can see that I didn't care about getting it on the cup or on his hand hooves, because those are a separate piece. So while I have my black sponge in my hand, I'm gonna go ahead and paint those hand hooves as well. Okay, we're gonna go right back to our black. On your big piece here, take your black sponge and very carefully paint just these nostrils. So just try to stay, you can go outside the lines of the nostril, but don't go up above that snout line by his eyes, and we'll use the brush to do the eyes, okay? And then while we're working with your black, we're gonna go ahead and give those hooves another coat. Okay. Oops, don't forget the little paw hooves. And set this piece aside. All right, I'm going to take another wedge and I'm going to use the with that blue to paint his hat. All right, and we'll just set that aside. And he'll need another coat, but we'll get that in a little bit. We use the other half of my wedge, and I'm going to paint my white pieces white. Now your white pieces are probably going to need 3 coats. Set those aside because we're going to have to give them another 2 coats probably. And my last wedge I'm going to take and I'm going to cut that in half. And I'm going to bring my mug over. And my mug is going to be red. However, I am going to darken the red into a deeper red. So I'm going to put a little bit of red on my table, and it takes the tiniest amount of black, okay? Not very much at all. You can always add, but it's impossible to take away. You end up using way more color to get rid of that darker black than is reasonable. So just add a little bit of black at a time. You can use your brush to mix this if you want to. Just going for like a burgundy. I didn't want to put burgundy in though because I thought you might not want burgundy. Maybe you want red. And it's easier to make the burgundy. You can't go backwards like I just said to make the red. There we go. Now we're there. Okay. Yeah, that's a nice deep color. Nice deep red. That's what I wanted. All right. I don't need another coat. Let's let that dry. Let's bring our white pieces back over and put their next coat on. we're gonna set those aside once again. I think they do need one more coat. All right, we're gonna paint our snout, and you can see I already have a color on my snout, which is what I was initially gonna have you guys paint it, but I didn't like it, so we are going to changed it because I wanted you guys to change the color of the snout. So I'm going to take this light brown color and I'm going to mix it with some white, and we're going to lighten it up a little bit. So we got that light brown color. I'm going to grab a generous amount of white, and I'm just going to use a little bit of that light brown. And then that's the color we're going to paint the snout. All right, and then we're going to let that dry, and we're going to give it a second coat. All right, I'll give this a second coat. Okay, so there's our snout fully painted. We're gonna set that aside. That doesn't need any more coats, and we're just gonna move on. All right, here we go. Heather, back. Okay. All right, we're gonna put a second coat on our cup. All right, that should be all that guy needs. And then let's get a second coat on our hat. All right. And then let's get the last coat on our white pieces. Sorry about that, being out of the frame. You know what you're doing. You're just putting a third coat on your white pieces. Okay, now we've got to paint the moose himself, right? So we're going to pull the moose back over and get all this other stuff out of our way. I am going to put a second coat on my little nostrils there, just in case I didn't get them covered fully the first time. And now on this piece here, we have to paint the horns, or not the horns. Yeah, they're horns, right? The antlers. Geez, Heather. We're going to paint the antlers, and we're going to paint his little face. We're going to paint his ears, and we've got to paint the bottom of the ear as well. We're going to do that in a different color. We're going to make it pink, like it's pink like the inside of his ears, okay? And then these little open pieces here, we're going to paint. So just follow along and you'll see what I end up painting. I am going to use my dark brown paint for this. Now, if you don't have a wedge left over, because nope, you should have one wedge left over. All right, so your last wedge that you have is what you're going to use for this. And I'm going to use, like I said, the dark brown paint. And now this brown does take several coats, but you should get it done while it's going to be dry, and then you're going to be able to just start all over. Okay, so you see I'm painting those open pieces just in case they show through, which they probably are going to. And the top of his ear. And don't worry about the getting on the hat, because remember, that's going to be covered by the actual hat piece. Now, I am trying to stay out of the bottom part of the ear where that line is, because we're going to paint those like pink, and pink will cover brown a little harder, so we're just going to avoid that if we can. Now, when I do the antlers, I am going to darken the antler color up a little bit, so that's why I'm trying to get this part done here first, okay? So let's just get in his little face. And it's okay to go out of those lines because the hat will sit over top of it. And then now let's just come back down and give it a second coat. We got to do our base as well, the base that he sits on. And then let's get his little face again. And the tops of the ears. Okay. That is probably going to need one more coat. Let's let that dry all the way. While we're letting that dry, we're going to hit the base, and then we'll go back for a third coat on those pieces. Now, the base, I don't care if it's covered completely. It can look more like a stain. So I just got some brown paint on my sponge, and I'm not pouncing it, I'm just swiping it on that base. And I'm making a mess all over my mousse. So just swipe that on there until it's covered and your paint's even. And then that's it for your base. Just set that aside. I'll come back over and give your other brown one last coat. Okay. Now we're going to take our brown, and we're going to put a little bit of brown on our table cover or box. And we're just going to grab a little dip into the black paint. And we're going to take a little bit of that brown, and we're going to just darken it up. Okay. And then we're going to paint our antlers. Antlers will need 2 coats. All right, let's let that dry all the way, and then we'll put that second coat on there. But while we're waiting for that to dry, we can do some other stuff. I'm going to take, let's see, what sponge am I going to take? I'm going to take my white sponge. I'm just going to cut the, what am I going to do? I'm going to take my white sponge. I'm going to pounce a lot of the paint out of it. And then I'm going to grab just a little bit of brown with it. And then I'm going to pounce that as well. So I've got just like a little bit of a shade of brown, like a light shade of brown. And I don't want a lot of paint, so I am pouncing most of that paint out. You can also pounce onto a napkin if you want. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my marshmallows, and I'm going to darken the edges. Now to do that, I'm just going to take this wedge, and very, very lightly, I'm going to go along the edges. Just grabbing the edge of it. You have to kind of tip your sponge to get in there. If you have blending pens, you can use a blending pen. I have blending pens at home, not at the studio. All right, now I need to get the sides of my marshmallows as well. So I'm just gonna tip and use the edge of my sponge and kind of get in there the best that I can. Trying to just define the edges of the marshmallow tops. Sometimes it's just a little bit of extra work really will set your painting apart. Okay, see how that turned out? It looks great, right? Just that little bit of extra detail does so much for the marshmallows. I'm gonna do the bottom edge as well, because that's where it's gonna be sitting in the cup. Now, one thing I did forget to paint here was this. Now, I want this to look like cocoa. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna grab that dark brown sponge that we just used on the antlers and paint that. So that's gonna be my cocoa. Okay, so we're gonna let that sit for just a second. And let's see. Now this, I'm going to do the same thing along the edges with this. I'm just gonna darken it up just a little bit. I didn't add any more paint to this wedge. I just am using what's left in it, just grabbing the edge and going all the way around, just very lightly, putting just a little bit of shade onto the edges here. Okay, that looks great. All right, so now we got to do some detail on, actually let's put one more coat on our antlers here because they're dry. And we can set this guy aside and start doing all the detail work. Now, if you don't want to do any detail work, you don't have to. You're almost done at this point. Just have to paint in his little ears. But details really set it apart. All right, set that aside. All right, so I'm going to take my round brush here that you got, and I'm going to take my blue paint that I used on the hat here. I'm just going to grab a little bit of that, and I'm going to grab some white, and I'm just going to make a lighter shade. Not too much lighter, just a little bit lighter. And you don't need very much of it. And then I'm going to take and I'm rolling my brush just to get my bristles back together. Because after I mixed up that paint with the brush, it kind of made the bristles all separate. So I roll the brush in the paint to get a nice round brush again. I'm just going to do some diagonal stripes on this. Just very thin, about 1/2 inch apart. And you'll have to continue to roll your brush in the paint. And then once I get them done in this direction, I'm going to come back and I'm going to do the other direction. All right, so now we're going to come back this way. All right, so that just added a little extra to our hat. And get my brush back rinsed off. And now I'm going to take my brown sponge that I use for the antlers. I'll make sure most of the paint is out of it. And I'm just going to darken the edges just a little bit of my hood here. Now you can't really tell that it's not a black, dark, or dark blue or anything like that, because I'm just doing the tiniest little bit along the edges here, just to give it a little defining edge. And like I said, those details really do make a lot of difference. Okay, that's all I'm gonna do with that. And we're gonna set that aside. And now I'm gonna take the same sponge that's at that dark, dark brown, and I'm going to see if I can get the tops of my ears here. I might just squeeze my sponge and kind of rotate everything. Yep, just a little bit there, just a little bit. Okay, good. Now, let's see what else we got to do. Let's see, we got these. We're gonna lighten those up. Let's take our white sponge. Do we still have a white sponge? I probably used it. We're gonna just get a clean, I'm cutting off with just an end of a wedge that I was using. And I'm gonna grab a little bit of the white again and get most of it off. And I'm gonna come in on the cup here, and I'm just going to, maybe I got too much off. And I'm just going to brush my sponge along the edges of the cup. That's too much on. And just give it this little white frosty edge. And then you gotta get in the handle as well. And do the same thing there. Okay, so you see that? Okay. And I'm going to do the moose ears, or the antlers as well. Same idea. Make sure you don't have much on there at all. And we're just gonna go around the edges. Just like that. Sometimes it's hard to get in those little dips and valleys. You gotta squeeze your sponge or cut your sponge so it's really small, and just kind of rotate your work around. Okay, there we go. That's what we're gonna do on that. And we're gonna do the same thing on the little hooves. So we're gonna do the outside edge of these little guys here. And we're just gonna come around and do a little in there. Same thing here. And then this over here. You can see my sponge is starting to fall apart because I don't have much paint on it, and I'm scraping it along the wood, so it's actually just pulling pieces of my sponge apart. That's okay, I'm gonna keep going. I don't have much left. Okay, so that's just a little extra detail there, and I'm gonna do the cocoa line. Same with that. This one's a little harder, so I'm really just pouncing along the top edges of it. Okay, so that's what that ends up like. All right, let's see. What else do we have to do? I know we have to do his eyes, and we have to do his ears and his cheeks. I think that's what's left. So let's go ahead and take our brush, and we're gonna mix up some blushy color. So that's gonna be a red and white, and I already got a mess of red right on my table cover. So we're going to take and we're going to add some white to that. I'm just grabbing it with my paintbrush in the corner there of my red. Now remember, it takes way more white than it does color to make a lighter color, okay? Okay. So I'm going to use my brush, and I'm going to paint the bottom part of his ear here. And just follow that line that's scored on there. Because you're painting it with a paintbrush, you'll end up with a lot more paint on it, so you probably actually only need the one coat. But if you need a second coat, by all means, give yourself let it dry and give it a second coat. All right, so that's what my ears look like. And now I've got to do his cheeks. Now cheeks are tricky and they can get frustrating. Don't get frustrated. You want to mix up your color so it's just slightly darker than what you use for your ears. And I'm not going to use the brush. I'm going to use a wedge. I'm just going to take the top of one of my wedges because I just want the tiniest little piece. And I am going to just pinch it. And I'm going to work my fingers are going to be really close to the wood. And I'm going to put just a tiny bit of the blush color on. All right, I got the tiniest little bit. And I'm going to go in right around where you can see his mouth line. I'm going to go right in that area, and I'm just going to make a circular motion. There we go. I'm not sure how well you can see that. So I'm pouncing most of my paint out of my sponge. Now, if you need more, you can always add more, right? So, okay, and then I'm going to come over on the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing. Just circular motion. And it's a little too much. I'm going to take a baby wipe, and I'm going to wipe a lot of that off. And come back in. There we go. Circular motion. And there we go. And we're just going to leave that. All right, now we're going to take our brush and we're going to clean all that pink paint out of it. And then we're going to grab our black paint and make sure our brush has got a nice little tip on it. Roll that brush if you have to. And then we're going to follow the line of the mouth. And we're just going to draw that in there with our brush. Don't worry if it gets a little wide, that's okay. There we go. And then we've got to do the eyes. So let's grab our mousse here. And let's get his eyes. Just outline them first. And then fill them in. All right. Nails are going to take a little longer to dry, but now with the exception of the little white dotty details at the end with the paintbrush, he's all set. So we're going to take and we're going to start gluing. So I've got to get myself a little space here. I'm going to mop up some of my paint. Right now, go ahead and use your super glue. I'm just going to use the open glue we have here in the studio. And remember to dry fit everything first. Now be careful if your eyes are still wet, but let's just dry fit everything. So we know where everything goes. Oh, that goes down here, here. Here, and here. Okay, and then our snowflake will go right here. So we have him pretty much everything where it needs to be. So one at a time, we can glue these pieces. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna take this whole top layer off here. And I'm gonna glue my hat pieces first. I'm just gonna pick my whole piece up together because it's kind of snug. I must have got paint on the edges there, but remember your glue needs to be in the middle, slightly away from the edges. And then when you put this on, just make sure that the hat edges line up with the edges of the bottom piece of the mousse on the top and on the sides. Next, we're gonna glue this piece on. You don't need to cover all the surfaces with the glue. Just get some key points. My glue is almost gone. And then you're gonna wanna match these pieces up as well. Make sure it's all nice and snug in there. And then we're gonna do the cup and the marshmallows. And the marshmallow piece. And then make sure that those line up. All right. I'm gonna put a little bit of glue where my hove hands go. And I'm gonna put a little bit of glue on the back side of my cocoa drip. And then a little bit of glue on my snowflake. cute. All right. And then we can just pop the stand on. So you'll see that the slot is further back, forward to front to back. And that's because he's triple layers thick here. So the back side of it is actually the part closest to one side. All right, and then there you go. There's your little moose winter decor. He's holding a cup of cocoa, and he is adorable. He turned out super cute. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Now, you know what? Before I go, real quick, if you want to do, you'll see us quite often in the studio do this. And what we do is we take our wrong side of our paintbrush and we dip it in our paint, and then we just add some little decorative dots to the moose. You can do the center of his eyes right here on the bottom. And maybe like on his little hooves. You can draw like a little line if you want. Gives it a little bit of character. And you can also use a paint marker for this. Up to you. You don't even have to do it. Okay, and now that's it. Hope you guys enjoy this month's project, and we'll see you again next month for number 52.